Isaac Newton once said, "The universe is not silent. It is a web of invisible forces." And you might think he was just talking about planets and stars, but really he was hitting on a fundamental truth about our own lives, that all of us are constantly being pulled and shaped by things we can't even see.
And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, based on the really fascinating work of Shadi Shafiq Obeidat. We're going to unpack this idea that our lives, just like the cosmos, are governed by these hidden forces, and, more importantly, figure out how we can learn to navigate them.
Okay, so to get a handle on these invisible forces in our lives, we have to start with one that we all know, one we feel every single day. Right, physical gravity. It's that constant, powerful pull keeping our feet on the ground and the planets spinning in their orbits. It's the perfect metaphor for an invisible force that dictates basically everything. But now, let's play with a bigger idea. What if that exact same principle also applies to our own minds? And this is where it gets really, really cool. Let's pivot from the outside world to our inner world, because it turns out the same laws that govern the stars might just govern ourselves.
So check this out. This slide just brilliantly maps physics onto our own psychology. In physics, right, the more mass something has, the stronger its gravitational pull. Well, in our lives, our psychological mass is built from our habits, the roles we play, our beliefs. The more we identify with them, the more we think, "this is me," the heavier they become and the stronger their pull is on us. And just like with planets, the closer you are to a trigger, that's proximity, the more powerful its influence becomes. It makes so much sense when you see it like this.
And look, this psychological mass isn't just one thing. It's the sum of everything we kind of collect over time. Our automatic emotional reactions, those thoughts that just loop over and over, our rigid opinions, and all the different hats we wear. The more we mistake all these layers for who we really are, the heavier we get, and the harder it is to actually move freely and make our own choices.
So, what does this gravity actually feel like day to day? Well, for a lot of us, it just feels like living life on autopilot.
I mean, think about it. Your little daily rituals. These are no longer conscious choices, are they? They're just grooves worn deep into our lives by endless repetition. We're literally falling into patterns. These tiny automatic actions are those gravitational forces at work, pulling us into this sort of mechanical way of living, where we just react instead of actually choosing. And this quote just nails it. Psychological gravity isn't some sudden shock. It's the slow, quiet, patient buildup of habits. Every single time we repeat a pattern without being aware of it, we make its pull a little stronger. That repetition itself is the engine, just quietly running our lives in the background.
But here's the good news. If there's a downward pull, there has to be a way to rise up against it. And this brings us to the core solution here, the principle of anti-gravity.
Now, anti-gravity isn't about escaping life or just floating away. Not at all. It's about creating a deliberate opposing force. It's the conscious choice to resist the pull of old habits and those knee-jerk reactions. It's really the art of finding and holding on to your own stable path, your own orbit, amidst all the forces trying to pull you off course.
So how do we actually create this force? Well, it's a pretty straightforward three-step process. First up, self-observation. You just start noticing the forces that pull you, without any judgment. Then comes mindfulness. You create a tiny pause, a little bit of space between a trigger, like, say, an annoying email, and your usual reaction. Freedom lives in that little space. And finally, conscious action. This is where you intentionally choose a different path, one that goes against the old gravitational habit.
All right, let's bring this all together, because the goal here is pretty amazing. It's not to completely eliminate gravity, but to find a perfect, sustainable balance with it.
I just love this analogy. Think about the moon. It's constantly being pulled by Earth's massive gravity, but it doesn't crash into us, does it? And it doesn't fly off into deep space. Why? Because it has its own motion, its own counterforce, that keeps it in this perfect, stable orbit. It's influenced, for sure, but it is not controlled. That right there, that's the ideal state.
The moon remains in perfect balance, a symbol of equilibrium between opposing forces. And that's the whole point, equilibrium. The goal is to be aware of all the forces pulling on you, your habits, your emotions, your thoughts, while cultivating enough conscious counterforce to stay steady, centered, and balanced.
And here's the real payoff. When you're no longer being blindly yanked around by all these unconscious forces, what emerges? What's left? Well, what's left is the version of you that can finally act with true intention and purpose. That is your authentic self, finally free to choose its own orbit.
So that leaves us with one last, really personal question to think about. What is the single heaviest layer of psychological mass you carry? Is it a specific habit, a recurring emotional reaction, a core belief that's holding you back? Because identifying that single heaviest weight, well, that's the very first step to generating your own anti-gravity and finding your true orbit.